You don't keep your guard up because people are dangerous. You keep it up because being seen feels unsafe. Not unsafe in a dramatic way, not unsafe in a way that creates panic or chaos. Unsafe in a quiet, internal way. The kind of danger that doesn't come from others, but from what might be exposed if you let someone stay long enough. So you learn to manage yourself, your tone, your reactions, your needs. You become controlled, composed, self-sufficient. You call it strength. And for a long time, it works. People respect you. They rely on you. They don't worry about you falling apart. But something subtle begins to happen. Relationships don't deepen. They stabilize and then stop. Affection reaches a ceiling. Closeness pauses at a certain distance and never moves past it. And you tell yourself this is normal, that this is just how you are, that you're not the emotional type. But underneath that calm surface, something else is happening. You're not protecting yourself from pain. You're protecting yourself from exposure, from being fully seen, from being fully received, from the risk that someone might touch the parts of you you've spent years containing. Love doesn't force its way through walls. It waits. And eventually, it leaves. Not because you were unlovable, but because nothing real was allowed to reach you. This isn't a relationship problem. It's not about bad timing. It's not about choosing the wrong people. It's something older than that. Something learned quietly, long before love ever entered the picture. The story you tell yourself usually sounds reasonable. I don't trust easily. I've been hurt before. I just need to protect myself. These explanations don't sound like fear. They sound careful, measured, even intelligent. And that's exactly why they survive unquestioned. Psychological defenses rarely announce themselves as fear. They announce themselves as logic. The truth is, most people who keep their guard up aren't afraid of being hurt. They're afraid of being exposed. Because exposure doesn't just risk rejection, it risks collapse. If someone sees the insecurity, the need, the softness you've been managing your entire life, what happens then? So the mind builds a strategy, not consciously, not dramatically, automatically. You stay composed, you stay capable, you stay emotionally controlled. You allow closeness, but only to a point. You can care deeply without being vulnerable. You can love without fully opening. And you mistake this for independence. But independence isn't what's happening here. This is containment. You are holding yourself together so tightly that nothing unplanned can emerge. And this strategy works for a while, until intimacy asks for more, until someone stays long enough to notice the distance, until a relationship reaches a depth where control is no longer enough. That's when self-sabotage begins, not because you want to destroy something good, but because closeness threatens the identity you built to survive. And survival always wins, even over happiness, even over love. Every guard has a reason. Not a dramatic one, not a story you can easily remember, a nervous system reason. Long before adult relationships, your system learned a rule about closeness. Not a belief, a rule. If connection once came with unpredictability, withdrawal, emotional absence, the system adapted. This is what attachment theory points to. Early relationships don't just teach us how to love, they teach us what to expect from closeness. If closeness once meant instability, distance begins to feel like safety. So you become observant, self-reliant, emotionally contained. Not because you don't feel, but because feeling once came with consequences. This is where Carl Jung becomes essential. Jung observed that the parts of ourselves we cannot accept don't disappear, they go underground. They form what he called the shadow. In guarded people, the shadow often holds the parts that were once inconvenient, the need for reassurance, the fear of abandonment, the desire to be chosen without conditions. These parts weren't evil, they were simply unwelcome, so they were buried. And Jung warned about this exact outcome. What you reject in yourself does not vanish. It returns indirectly through behavior you don't consciously choose. This is how self-sabotage is born. Not from malice, from disownment. You don't pull away because love is wrong. You pull away because love activates parts of you that were never allowed to exist safely. Even control, which often looks like strength, is a response to perceived instability. Think of Niccolò Machiavelli. Behind all his emphasis on control was a simple assumption: the world is unstable, so power must compensate. But control always has a cost. When you manage emotions instead of experiencing them, you stop participating in life. And love cannot exist under surveillance. It requires presence, and presence requires risk. The cost of keeping your guard up isn't dramatic. That's what makes it dangerous. It doesn't explode your life. It slowly narrows it. Relationships don't end violently. They fade. People don't accuse you. They adapt. They stop asking deeper questions. They stop leaning in. Not because they don't care, but because there's nowhere left to go. You remain liked, respected, even loved, but never fully met. This is the tragedy Donald Winnicott described. He spoke of the false self, a version of you that forms to survive, to be acceptable, to stay safe. And it works, but it costs you spontaneity, joy, depth. You can live an entire life this way, functional, stable, quietly empty. And the most painful part isn't loneliness. It's knowing, on some level, that the distance wasn't imposed on you, it was maintained by you. Years pass, opportunities for intimacy come and go, and you slowly become the kind of person who says, "I don't need much," when what you really learned was how to want less. This is how self-sabotage disguises itself as maturity, not destroying relationships, but never letting them become real enough to matter. The way out of this isn't confidence, it isn't forcing vulnerability, and it isn't letting your guard down all at once. That language misunderstands the problem. The guard isn't the enemy, it's evidence. Evidence that something in you learned correctly at the time, that openness was unsafe. The mistake is not that the guard exists. The mistake is believing you must live behind it forever. Jung believed wholeness came not from eliminating the shadow, but from integrating it, from allowing the disowned parts of yourself back into conscious life. Not to indulge them, but to stop fighting them. This is where Socrates still matters. Know thyself was never about judgment, it was about honesty. You don't heal by becoming someone else. You heal by stopping the war with who you already are. Love doesn't ask you to be fearless. It asks you to be present. And presence begins when you stop treating your own vulnerability as a defect. You are not broken. You are unfinished. And unfinished things feel dangerous only when you believe they must be perfect before they're allowed to exist. The guard you raise doesn't protect love, it replaces it with safety. And safety, when overused, becomes isolation. You don't lose people because you are too much. You lose them because you are never fully there. Not absent, just unreachable. And the most difficult truth is this: no one is keeping you from intimacy now. The past taught you caution, but the present is waiting for your permission. Not to be fearless, just to be real. Because real connection doesn't require certainty. It requires presence. And presence is the one thing a guarded life never practices.